Hello there, this is Stephen Ball at Delphi, and following on in my series looking at building a RAD server with MasterDetail data being exposed through RESTful APIs, we're going to be building a client today to consume the APIs that we built previously. So last time we finished off by having a MasterDetail and then MasterDetail Detail API, which was fully documented, and we're able to then call that through REST. We also then rolled our own, which we implemented some code because REST has been completely code free, to actually have a master with detail embedded in it. So we had the questions with answers embedded inside. And we're going to be using those API calls today as we go through. So to build the client, the first thing we need to do is connect to it programmatically. We'll start off with a little trick using the REST Debugger and using that to be able to test our connection first and foremost, and then be able to copy the components that we need for that exact connection so we can put that straight into our application. So this is great for connecting to any RESTful service. You can check it out, test it all, make sure it's working, and then just literally copy and paste the components through. Once we've got the components in there, we'll have a look at some of the setup that we'll do internally just to get the local data sets working with the MasterDetail. And then also we'll look at some coding that we can do just to reduce any potential round trips that might get accidentally triggered because we're using data sets to actually keep a track of where we are, and also they have events that fire, so we want to make sure that as we're loading the data into the data set, we're not automatically then polling back to fetch data until we need it. Okay, so let's get in. So here we have our RAD server application with the exams, the questions and the answers. I've got my RAD server open here, so let's just go ahead and open the browser here. Let's just make sure this is working, exams, and then we can see we've got the list of exams coming back. So I'm just going to take this URL and I'm going to go to Tools, REST Debugger, and into here I'm going to paste in the URL. Now I can hit execute, and that's executed okay. I can see the data's come back. I can see that this is tabular data, which is great. However, this isn't the best connection. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to connect up the base URL in the request, and I'm going to put into here the resource. So the resource is the exams. And the reason for doing that is it enables me to then have additional parameters that I can put in if I need to. However, it still works the same, but when I copy the components, and I'll go through these components in a moment, I've now got a request that has the resource in it and the base, which is just the URL. So if I need to relocate from my development to my deployment, I only need to update the URL for the base part rather than anything else. So let's go ahead now and add a new application in here. So I'm going to add a new project, Delphi multi-device application project. And just want a blank application. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to put down in here also a data module. And I'm going to put my components into my data module. And let's just open these out here. And just have a quick look at what we've actually got. So here's the TREST client, and you can see the base URL where it's going to. We've got the request, which is the exams endpoint. We've got the response, which at the moment is empty. And then we've got the dataset adapter, which is connected to the response. And then the memory table, which has going to be taking the data, converting it through. So we can actually go onto the request here and execute that directly from the IDE. You can see we've got a response 200. And if we go and have a look at the response here, we can see now we actually have some content. And we can see that the content's actually been fetched back. We can see that we've got our dataset adapter, which is active. And if we actually go to edit the data that's come back, we can see the data that's come back directly from from there. So that's pretty cool. We've got a nice request. Now, what I'm going to do is I'd like to actually call one additional endpoint here, and that endpoint is the exams full. So let's just go back and check we get the exams full correct. So it's localhost, and there we are, I've got one there. So let's just go back to the RAD Debugger, and I'm just going to paste that in here, and I just need to go ahead and change this now to be exam ID. And we can see here now it's putting me a URL segment parameter in just by putting the curly brackets around the bit that I want to parameterize. I'm just going to give that a value here of 1 for the moment, and let's just send the request, and we can see we've got some data come back. Now that's great. I can see I've got the data, but with the nested data inside of it. This here is giving me a root element of 0.answers. This one here would be 1.answers, and so on. So first of all, I'm going to just leave that empty, and I'm just going to copy the components. Again, I've got the full set, so let's just come back over here and paste these in, and I'm going to get rid of the client because I can connect this one to the base client. It's the same thing. It's still the same request, it's still the same response, but here I've got a dataset adapter which is converting into this table here. I'm going to make another table with the dataset adapter, and if we go back to the RAD Debugger and let's just click on that top one there, I'm going to copy that in here and use that as the root element in here. So if we go ahead now and execute, we've got a response 200, and I can go and have a look at the data that's come back in here. So okay, I need to update my mem table that one's going to. Let's just set that active false and back to true. And let's edit the data. We can see here now we've got the questions, and it does have the answers within there. That's fine. But if we come over here and have a look at this data set, which is being fed by this second one with the root node on it, I can see then I've got the actual specific answers, the true, false, which one's correct, and the sequence they go in. So that's great. Now, the only thing is, obviously, at the moment, the root element of 0 is picking up the first record from the data set. If we actually change this to 1 and come in here and have a look at the data, we can see now we're on record 33 and 34. Let's go ahead and change this to the second record, or the 12th, it really doesn't matter anyway, and edit the data. You can see the numbers have updated. So we need to keep these in sync. How do we do that? Well, the simplest way is by having an on-scroll event here that's just going to update over here. So I'm just going to go back and let's just reset this back to 0. So we can use the after scroll event. There we are, after scroll. And I can then do something like self.vidac mem table 3. No, it's not the mem table, is it? It's the response adapter here. Root element, and let's just go and copy the root element that we've got in there at the moment. 0.answers. equals 0 answers, and we just need to actually change this now so we have the ID going in there. So easiest way to do that is just to do dataset dot record number, and because this is 1 based and we need to be 0 based, we'll just go with the pred, which will be the previous version. And that should then basically provide us with the right set of data. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and just quickly test this in our client. So let's put down a grid. That'll give us the first set of data, and then we can have the second set of data, and then the third set of data. So let's go ahead and quickly bind. We need to now use the unit that we created. And let's just refresh the design. Okay. And here we want to connect to grid 1. We're going to get the exams. So where's the data set for that one? That's mem table 1. Now we haven't executed the first one, so let's just go execute that. That'll fetch the data back in. When we come back here, we should now be able to see that the fields are populated in. Just helps at design time now, making sure things are set up. The second grid, if you select the control, it will highlight it in the Live Bindings Designer. And we're going to connect that up to the second memory table, which is the questions. And then the third one will set up to the answers. So let's just lay out here, get those controls together. So this is great. This is kind of giving us the data. We can now go ahead and use the column editors. We can add the columns in. We can take the columns out that we don't want to have in there. We can update the header names and everything, lay them out, set the widths and everything, make it a little bit prettier. But that should at least now provide us, if we go ahead and we might need to just put a button down here. So let's just do data module 3 and it's rest request 1 dot execute and data module 3 dot rest request 2 dot execute. Okay, so let's go ahead and run. It needs to string. There we are. Now, one thing we do need to be careful of here actually is this is in the after scroll event, and we're on memory table 3 here, which is the wrong memory table. We want to be on memory table 2. So let's go ahead now and try and see what happens. What we do need to say here is that yeah, well, let's just go and see what happens now if we, well, first of all, let's try it without and then see with, and we'll see some of the challenges that pop up. So first off, we can see we've got our exam 1, we've got the questions, but as we navigate through, nothing's updating, it's not linked. And if we go to the different exams, we're still not getting the questions updated because we haven't got anything that's actually changing the rest of the data. So let's now go ahead and let's just see if we can get the second part working first. Now this is providing an argument out of range, and the reason for that is the the data set hasn't been populated yet. So we need the event here, but we can't actually run it yet down the other side. The other thing that we want to be able to do here is on the after scroll. We actually want to fire the request for the second set of data based on the parameter for the first one. So what we should do is actually come back here and let's just do data module 3.load exams, and in our data module let's go ahead and make a method. To load the exams. And in here we can just say, okay, well let's just execute REST request 1. Let's just get the first set of data in. And then once we've got the first set of data in, after we scroll here, get the current second set. So let's go and get the questions. So here we want to execute, but before we do that we need to update the parameter. So we can just say REST request 2.params and the param by name, which we called exam ID, and we can set the value of that, and we can set that to be the data set field by name exam ID as string. Now we now hit the second set of issues, that we know the data is going to be populated into this table, and this is going to be firing all the time as we're loading. So we need to have some method to avoid the circular referencing here as we're loading up. Because let's just leave this out for the moment, and let's just do something really simple. Say, okay, look, if exam ID equals nothing, then exit. And that might help. Let's just go and see if we can get at least that to work. Let's go and run. Now we can see it's worked to a point, and we can see now that we're getting the different exams and the questions coming through, and we can see it's updating to the first answer for each one, which is pretty good. But we still have this problem of scrolling between records. And we're going to have a bigger problem here when we've got one record here and a lot in here, that if we've got the range incorrectly set, it's going to cause us problems later on. But we're beginning to see we're able to get kind of the master detail working quite quickly. Let's try something similar in here then. We can do dataset if question ID equals nothing, then exit out the way. Let's see if that provides what we need. So we're now getting some data come through, and we can actually now navigate through as well, which is quite good. So let's now go back to this exam here, and that's picked up okay. That's nice. So let's have a quick look at how many API calls we're making though as we do this. So I'm just going to clear this. Let's just execute. We can see we've got quite a few API calls that are being run in the background here before we open up. And then as we navigate through, it's not too bad because we fetched all the data back initially with the first call. But this first load, we're actually doing quite a lot of hits here. So I'm going to show you a different approach that I've taken, and I'm just going to go into this sample that I put together already. So using a similar kind of method, using the load exams. So the load exams, I then added a begin load and an end load. And the begin load executes the the first query. I've just renamed all the components on here to actually be relevant to the relevant to what they are. So REST request exams, response exams, the response dataset adapter. I just shortened to RDSA, for example. So everything's kind of named up correctly. But we just increment this load variable, and if loading is basically fload equals 0. So if we're not loading, then greater than 0. If we're not loading, then we are going to be continuing through. So I'm just checking to make sure that the value is there. I then set the param by name and then begin the load. I'm also updating here the answers root node to be 0, just to reset that to make sure that we don't have any issues further on down the line, which we would get, or we may get, just by preventing the load element happening at the same time. And then we're just executing the questions for and updating the data set to scroll, saying, yeah, we've done the scrolling now, you can go through the after scroll event again because we're now no longer loading, and that will then fire this event. And then similar thing here, just making sure that we've got data, that we're not loading, and then updating the ID. So if we go ahead and run this sample now, and cleared the list, here's the same kind of button 1 event, so I'm just going to fire that. You can see it's loaded up a lot quicker. There was only 2 method calls in the background because it wasn't kind of doing the duplicates every time it loaded the item in here. So the whole application is just running that a little bit faster just because it only has to do it once on the initial load. So nice little trick, and there we are. We have our MasterDetail relationships working very, very quickly and easily using the root node element and the local datasets. So thanks very much. I hope you've found that useful. So we've been through, had a look at getting the components and the connectivity working with the REST debugger in the first place. We've then been looking at calling our local datasets and how to convert using the root node element the data into the detail element that's been provided as an array property within the JSON data packet, and how to reduce the round trips at the end there by implementing a simple load method on the data module. And that's all then left with a single line of code on our data module with everything bound visually to get us up and running. So thank you very much. Next time I'll be looking at adding some security onto our RESTful server and the changes that we need to implement there.